The 2021-22 season hasn't been the best for the Atlanta Hawks, who currently sit in 10th position in the Eastern Conference. This means that with just over a month to go, Atlanta has zero chance of making it into the play-ins, which is crazy considering just how much of a help Trae Young has been. So what's wrong with the Hawks right now? And can things get any better? For all this and more, stay tuned. But first, a reminder about our brand new giveaway. We're giving away a PS5 with a copy of NBA 2K22 and Madden 22. All you have to do is watch the full video, leave a like, comment the keyword hidden in the video, and make sure you're subscribed. It's that simple. First of all, let's take a look at why fans have turned against Atlanta this year. Because the Hawks have never been a favorite to win. Take a look at the past couple of years, and you'll see that Atlanta are quite used to being at the bottom of the conference. And while they have the ability to pop off at times and secure some rather impressive wins, it's their inconsistency and lack of power players that has always let them down. But then something happened in the 2020-2021 season. The Hawks came out swinging and surprised fans by finishing in the 5th overall position in the Eastern Conference, above other favorites like the Miami Heat and Boston Celtics. This was likely the result of Trae Young finally making his mark in the NBA after being traded to Atlanta back in July of 2018. Suffice to say, Hawks fans finally had some hope that their team was on the up and up. And never before has a region been so excited for the 2021-22 season. But this hype wasn't all helpful for the Hawks, who seemed to choke on the hope of their fans and, once again, land up in the bottom half of the Eastern Conference table. But if there's one player who can't be blamed for this, it's Trae Young, as the 23-year-old Texas native has been playing his heart out and achieving some rather impressive records in the midst of his team's failure. This isn't at all surprising, though, considering how experts in the field have always placed their point guard on a pedestal. So the failure of the Hawks can't be the resultant of them lacking a power player. The reason why we have to point this out is because Atlanta has always relied upon this excuse in the past, with fans mentioning that the team requires a leader to build upon before they can reach new heights. And to a certain extent, this was 100% true. Without Trae Young at the helm, Atlanta was completely lost and would consistently appear at the very bottom of the Eastern Conference table. And while his arrival in the team didn't result in an immediate increase in strength, there's no doubt that he's now become the power player Atlanta have always needed. Just look at his performance in the beginning of January and you'll know what we mean. For those of you who missed it, Young went on to score a grand total of 56 points against the Portland Trail Blazers, along with 14 assists. It was the first time any player in the NBA has been able to achieve this elusive performance, which was made even more impressive by him hitting 17 of 26 from the field. But there was one thing wrong with the game that night. Despite his record-breaking performance, Atlanta still lost. And while the Trail Blazers celebrated the win, fans couldn't believe what they were watching. It's clear from this moment that it's the rest of the Hawks that need to step up their game and build upon the genius that is Trae Young. If not, they'll always be destined to fail. This leads us to the first area that needs to be worked on, which is no doubt defense. It's no secret that Atlanta have a poor defensive line. In fact, this has been a criticism against the team since time immemorial. But in the last few years, Atlanta's defense has gone from bad to worse, which is why it doesn't really matter how many points they're able to score against the opposing team, as the opposing team will always be able to score almost double that against the Hawks. They say a good offense is the best defense, but that only works when defensive skill is still present in the game. If it isn't, then there's no way that you'll be able to get away with just being great on offense. And if you have any doubts with that line of thinking, just take a look at how the Hawks are coming along this season. We'd even argue that a defensive structure is far more important than a great offense. Forcing a turnover and leaving your offensive player with space to run away with the game is a true strategy that many of the leading teams employ at the moment. But Atlanta is somewhat lost when it comes to the formation of a defensive line. The team's current defensive rating is set at a measly 113.0, which is the 4th worst rating in the history of the league. Now, we're not suggesting that the team pivot completely and focus on defense. This will never happen with Young at point guard, but they need at least some defensive structure. So why have the Hawks failed so miserably on defense in the last few years? Like we said earlier, this has everything to do with them being an offensive team in general, and you can't be an offensive team while still being brilliant of defense. That being said, this isn't a question of all-around brilliance. Fans at the moment are simply asking for competence on defense, which has decreased drastically in this last season. And we have a feeling that this has everything to do with the departure of Clint Capella from the team, not physically, but in mind. You see, he was the anchor of Atlanta's defensive growth last season and was considered by many to be one of the best rim protectors in the league. So while the Hawks weren't able to improve their overall defensive structure by much, at least he was there to secure the rim and prevent a certain amount of points per game. Nowadays, the Hawks have next to no rim protection whatsoever and have to rely on the opposing team making mistakes on offense before they're able to pounce and possibly push for a turnover. Worse yet, next to no pressure is placed on opposing offensive players now, which significantly decreases the chances of these players making damning mistakes. And while Capella is still present on the team, he appears to be struggling from the long-term effects of COVID-19, which has caused his health to steadily decline. The stats don't lie, with points scored within 6 feet of the basket, increasing from 52.9% to 61.3% this season. But honestly, this is nothing compared to Atlanta's lapse in transition defense. This is the true reason for the Hawks being labeled as one of the worst defensive teams, and has everything to do with the way they're being coached at the moment. For those of you who aren't aware, a team is supposed to transition from offense to defense in full, depending on who has possession at that moment. Even offensive players are supposed to play a defensive role in an effort to increase the pressure on the opposing team and force them into a plethora of mistakes. That will cause a turnover and allow you to make a bigger difference on offense, after all. But when it comes to the Hawks, they don't seem to have a grasp on how transition defense is supposed to work and when transitions should come into play. According to the latest stats, Atlanta allows 1.217 points per possession in transition on defense, which is by far the worst mark in the league, by far. It basically means that an opponent who forces a turnover is guaranteed a point, with all those points eventually adding up and winning them the game. Despite how much Trae Young will be able to score in reaction to this, we aren't looking for perfection when it comes to Atlanta. We don't even look for this when it comes to top teams like the Jazz and Suns. You're already out of a position when a turnover takes place, after all. But to be this bad is a travesty, too. That's not all, though, as the Hawks have also been fairly unhealthy this season. It's no excuse, of course, but it's mighty hard to improve your defensive structure when so many players are in and out of the lineup. The mixing of the starting squad no doubt has an effect on the consistency of a team, with various players having to work harder to find a working rhythm between one another. And when it comes to the COVID-19 protocols, the Hawks have been ridiculously unlucky. The team have lost both John Collins and Bogdan Bogdanovic to the rulings of the Health and Safety Division, as well as head coach Nate McMillan when things finally return to normal. Suffice to say, it hasn't been the easiest of times for Atlanta, but since other teams have had to deal with these regulations, it's really no excuse. Improve your defense or fall away is how we see it. And there you have it, just some of the reasons why we believe the Atlanta Hawks are so terrible at the moment. What do you think of their prospects next season, though? And do you know of any other glaring errors we forgot to mention? Be sure to let us know in the comment section down below.